Victoria. We're, I think, live.
All right.
Exciting. So, I wanted to first of all welcome everybody. Hello and welcome to this first episode of Where Are the Graduates? The idea is over the years, I've had many excellent students. I work at Penn State Altoona. I'm actually a professor teaching cybersecurity. My official title is Professor of Information Sciences and Technology. My full name is Jung Ryu, as you know, but I go by Dr. J. So my students call me Dr. J, including Victoria, who is our special guest today. But over the years, we've had so many brilliant students, and I thought we should start talking to them and see how they're doing these days. And that's why I started doing this episode of Where Are the Graduates? Actually, today is our first day doing it. So, without further ado, let me introduce our special guest, Victoria. Her full name is Victoria McIntyre, and she finished her undergraduate degree in security and risk analysis at Penn State Altoona. I think it was back in 2000, was it 15?
2015, yes.
Yes. Yeah. So it's been a while since she graduated, and she's been doing really well. But I'll let her introduce herself a little bit. So, Victoria, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Absolutely. So, yes, I'm glad to be your first guest. I'm really excited to speak with you today.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about my background and kind of what I've been working on since I graduated. Following graduation, I took a position actually back with Penn State. So I worked for the Applied Research Lab at Penn State, um, doing desktop support work and a little bit of cybersecurity work. And from that perspective, I was kind of in a boots on the ground position, working compliance as well as helping our users with technical issues that they might have had. From there, I pivoted to a cybersecurity focused role a few years later
Mhm.
under the Applied Research Lab at Penn State. And I left the university around the beginning of the year, and I am currently working as a governance, risk, and compliance consultant. So I work with different security frameworks such as High Trust, NIST CSF. I've also worked with GDPR and CCPA and a few other frameworks that are part of this industry.
Exciting.
Yeah.
And Victoria also, as an undergrad student, had a special experience because she was my research assistant. So she and I, we actually have a publication. I think more than one, but one of the
We have
publications,
2.
yeah,
Yes.
two. One of them I think was developer friendly software security. We did a
Yes.
book chapter together. We also
Yes.
did the conference paper together. So yeah,
Yes.
we co-authored some papers together.
Yes. Yes. Those were very fun. So it was a lot of work, but it was well worth the effort. Um,
Exactly.
Great experiences as an undergrad.
Oh yeah, definitely. And yeah, those opportunities available as an undergrad students, I mean, they're there, but I mean, they have to be taken advantage of. And I'm very proud of
Yes.
Victoria because she was very proactive and she was always interested in working on those projects. And that's what I really like about, Victoria. And I think that's paying off
Yes.
all the hard work.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've even used that in my current job because
Mhm.
like in different roles post graduation because when I find opportunities to be proactive, like I'm trying to continue that trend of
Yeah.
finding those little windows of opportunities, but that started as
Mhm.
an undergrad.
Right, right. And one thing I remember, I mean, we're kind of going off script here. One thing I remember is like I had this first meeting with Victoria, and she was like very calm and very, very mature. And I thought, She must be like somebody, maybe an adult student, you know. I thought she was, but I mean, not by the looks, by the way, but by just her demeanor, her, the way she behaved. I thought, oh, she can't be, like 19-year-old or 18-year-old, that type of, student. But it turns out to be she was just more mature than other students. Yeah.
Thank you.
I basically saw your potential from the very beginning. Actually, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's get started with our questions. The first one
Yeah.
is, can you share with us your experience of working in industry? I know the very first question actually was about more about your journey, right?
Yes.
In cybersecurity in general, but
Yeah.
including your work in industry. But can you share, yeah, your journey just in general, both as a student as also in industry a little bit? Yeah.
Yes. So when I came into the undergrad program, I didn't really have experience in cybersecurity or any kind of IT. It's not like I did any kind of programming or any kind of hacking in high school or anything like that. So a lot of my knowledge and experience came through the projects that we worked on in the classroom.
Mhm.
One in particular that stands out to me is the capstone project that we did. So it was a 400 level course where we
Right.
had to work with a local company or business and assess their cybersecurity posture and help them with different projects.
Mhm.
So, I mean, uh, the project that we worked on for the local organization was assessing their security posture, and
Mhm.
we had done that through vulnerability assessments and social engineering tactics,
Mhm.
and that kind of opened up my eyes. That might have been even my first taste in compliance work, now that I think
Yeah.
about it. But it gave me that insight that I could go inside an organization and really help them and give them
Mhm.
proactive measures to take to
Mhm.
improve their security posture
Mhm.
based on their environment.
Mhm.
Now, like I said earlier, my first job straight out of college was more of a boots on the ground type of a position. It was very technical. Um, like I said, it involved helping our users out with different technical issues, making sure that systems were properly controlled and the proper security measures were in place for those systems.
Mhm.
That um, provided a really good foundation for me
Mhm.
with my current role, because having that technical experience has allowed me to make better recommendations to the clients that I currently serve.
Right.
So it's been very, very helpful.
Mhm.
Um, Along the way as well, I would say that I've definitely utilized my soft skills. So
Mhm.
in my current work and in my previous work, there's been tons of reading, tons of writing. Communication is absolutely important, especially now with remote work being more prominent. It- the communication aspect is critical.
Mhm.
um, some constraints that I've learned between school versus working in industry. So in school, in your courses, you learn about the most ideal working environments.
Mhm.
So if you want to set up a cybersecurity program, here's the best way to do it. Here are your best practices, or here's the most ideal environment.
Mhm.
Um, and really, in a lot of those cases, it's like if you had
Mhm.
the budget, the sky's the limit, and all the personnel that you could possibly need. Like,
Mhm.
it was the ideal environment. When you work in the real world, you see that there are a lot of constraints. There are budgetary constraints.
Mhm.
There are personnel or departments that may be resistant to change. Um, Even technological constraints depending on the environment. So, for instance, like in a DoD environment, it's a very controlled space, so you have limitations when it comes to the technical capabilities that you might have in certain environments. And those are all things I've learned along the way.
Yeah, you definitely learned a lot. Yeah, since you graduated, and I'm sure you learned a lot during your stay as an undergraduate student at Penn State Altoona.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I still remember like how thorough the report you did. I mean, of course, there are requirements always for these projects and
Yes.
for our students, but I remember you even like submitted some kind of a CD, right, that contained all these documents. And I remember the company that hired your team was thrilled and very excited and so happy. And I think you planted that seed, right? When
Yes.
you were working on the project as an undergraduate student, and as you said, you sort of built on your experience, and that's probably how you found your passion for this type of work and a more compliance oriented type of work. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
I didn't realize it at the time. You don't really think about it as you're trying to keep up with your uh, classwork and your homework assignments
Mhm.
and working, having different project meetings and whatnot. But that absolutely planted the seeds.
Yeah.
And now that I see it from the industry side, I see the importance of compliance
Mhm.
even more now working in the industry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but those experiences as a student were
Mm.
extremely beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the responsibilities we have as faculty members is really exposing our students to those types of opportunities and let them discover, what's really out there, what it's like to be in industry. I mean, it's probably almost impossible for you to learn many of these things until you actually get your job, but at the same
Yes.
time we can, also try to expose our students as much as possible through these types of collaborations with companies and organizations out there. So I guess that approach definitely worked.
Yes.
It was
It
great.
definitely did.
Yeah. Yep. The second question is, from your perspective, can you describe the role of cybersecurity in IT? And of course, we have a basic understanding of, why cybersecurity is so important in
Yes.
IT, but I'm sure you have your special take on it.
Yes. So I mean, I've found that a lot of organizations may look at the IT side and they think they're covered
Mhm,
um, if they focus on the major infrastructure, so your systems, your networks, your servers, and that sort of thing.
mhm,
From the cybersecurity's perspective, it's taking that a step further and saying, okay, what are the weaknesses within that infrastructure?
mhm,
What are the best ways to strengthen those weak areas? And
mhm,
then, as I mentioned earlier, there are also the different constraints. So you have lack of manpower, you
mhm,
have budgetary constraints,
mhm,
personnel who are limited to change, or I'm sorry, they are resistant to change rather.
mhm,
So you kind of have to get creative with how you approach cybersecurity as well. And
mhm,
from my perspective, I
mhm,
have to get creative with how I share that information with clients,
mhm,
how to stress the importance of cybersecurity and building a relationship with them so that they understand that we are coming in to identify their weaknesses and to provide them with proactive measures
mhm,
moving forward that they can take to improve their cybersecurity posture. So
mhm,
taking it above just basic,
mhm.
we have systems and servers and all of
Oh, yeah.
that, taking that a step further and saying, okay, let's strengthen those weak areas. And from a business perspective, this when you make those investments, the monetary
Mhm.
investments and the time investments and so forth, this will actually um, grow. This will help with business growth as well.
Oh, yeah, 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 exactly. And I think a lot of times, when we think about cybersecurity, you're thinking of it as something like extra. But
Yes.
as you mentioned, I think cybersecurity is one of those elements that even help your business grow. And be more efficient and so on. So it's not an add-on, but I guess it's one of
Mhm.
those essential elements in your business success. So for
Yes.
example, I think something like availability, right? So availability is like one of the cybersecurity type of concepts. But when you think about your business, if your system, IT system is not available for your customers, you're starting to lose money. So
Mhm.
it has a
Yes.
direct correlation with your bottom line. So in that
Mhm.
sense, I think cybersecurity is not an afterthought at all. You have to be thinking about it all the time.
It cannot be an afterthought, and, I mean, if you're thinking about cybersecurity strictly from the IT perspective,
Mhm.
you've gotta expand your mindset a little bit.
Mhm.
You've gotta think about it more from the business perspective.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, and we have these things like uh, emergencies like earthquakes, or I mean it's kind of rare, but I mean it could
Yes.
be like a ransomware attack. What are you going to do now?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so you have to be prepared for those types of emergencies too, and
Mhm.
cybersecurity
Absolutely.
definitely plays a very important role there. Yeah. Okay, moving on to our third question, which is about your experiences as both, student and also working professional in industry, and how did they actually come together? Now you're sort of turning into a more seasoned industry person, right?
Yes. So we spoke about it earlier how your cybersecurity program at Penn State,
Mhm.
you expose students to as much as you can
Yeah.
within the 4-year degree plan. Now,
Mhm.
of course, that could be shorter, that could be longer,
Mhm.
but generally it's supposed to be within 4 years. And as we know, cybersecurity is not just hacking or overseeing systems to keep the bad guys out. There's so much more to it than that. There's
Yeah.
so many little niches and so forth. So, I mean, as a student, and we spoke about some of these experiences earlier. Um, some of the classroom experiences that I can think of were working with
Mhm.
digital forensics, counterterrorism,
Mhm.
cyber law. Um, there was a sandbox server room environment for us to just kind of roll up our sleeves and play with that a little bit. We had the opportunity to break things in a safe environment where there was some oversight or where we could learn from each other. Um, and I remember that a lot of the classwork was very team oriented, and there were some elements that were
Mhm.
individually focused as well, but we had a lot of collaborative efforts so we could learn off of each other and learn what it's like to work with
Mhm.
folks who had different experiences and um, different strengths, and we could play to each other's strengths, and that's all been very helpful
Yeah.
um, to
Mhm.
my professional experiences.
Mhm.
Some other experiences that I can think of as a student that really stand out to me as well were
Mhm.
those papers that we worked on,
Mhm.
and the conference paper that we worked on as well.
Mhm.
And when we presented that in Taiwan, that was a really cool experience.
Mhm.
And working under the deadline of when the paper's due or when the conference is coming up and preparing for that, those are things that have helped me in my current role because we have deadlines and expectations that arise when it comes to that are present when we're meeting with clients. We need to get it done by a certain date. We need to wrap up a project because we've both agreed to an end date. Um, so that working within those deadlines and having the ability to speak publicly has really benefited me in my career as well.
Mhm.
Since I was exposed to so many different experiences as a student, um, I kind of developed that mindset that basically in this field, the sky's the limit. There's always something new to learn. There's
Mhm.
always a new experience to grow from. Cybersecurity is constantly changing, and I've tried to carry that out with my current with my current work experience and just working in the industry.
Mhm.
And as I've continued to learn more on the job and network with others and read and watch cyber related courses, um, within that, with all these experience, I discovered that GRC niche that I work in currently,
Mhm.
and I love it. And
Mhm.
the great part is because this field is so broad, I
Mhm.
could take the experiences with GRC and
Mhm.
take that and 5 years from now do something completely different.
Oh, yeah.
And it's great. I love that there's always something new to learn, and
Mhm.
um, there's a new area to work in, or perhaps
Mhm.
working differently, doing similar tasks.
Mhm.
It's very, very exciting to be in this field.
Mhm. Yeah, governance, risk management, and compliance, GRC, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, we get to use a lot of these acronyms
you
in
you you
yeah.
you work in it and you just rattle off acronyms. I should have spelled that one out, but
Oh, no, no.
we work with so many acronyms. It just you
Oh,
don't even think about it, after you use it so much.
yeah, but I think that's one of the signs of a person being this very professional field and becoming an expert in the field. And I think this is something I tell my students all the time. Whenever I teach a course, I tell them, think of it as learning an entirely new language. By the end of
Yes.
the course, you'll have much wider vocabulary now, especially in terms of, I guess, what that course is trying to teach. And by being able to speak the language, you'll be able to work with the professionals, you'll be able to develop these new insights. So yeah, it is part of your learning process, right? Picking up all those acronyms.
Acronyms along the way.
The jargons. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And let's see. Now the next item was these types of perspectives you develop as a working professional are very, I would say, uh, interesting and something you want to share with others. But by being a professional in cybersecurity, I'm sure you have anything, I mean, something very special you want to share with the viewers in this case. So, anything you want to share there? Your insights by working in the cybersecurity profession?
Yes. So when you're a student, like I said a little bit earlier, I started mentioning how you have the perspective of the ideal environment, the ideal working environment, and you're limited to the number of or the types of technologies you may use. So
Mhm,
there are certain um, there may be some constraints as a student because you're limited to what you learn in the classroom and different tools you might use. And again, like having an idea of the ideal work environment,
mhm,
you go into the industry expecting an ideal work environment, especially from companies that are well established.
mhm,
Um, when you're actually in the field, um, like I mentioned earlier, there are those constraints that exist with personnel resistant to change or budgetary concerns or or technological constraints and limitations based on the environment. So
mhm,
those do exist. Again, there are different ways to get creative
mhm.
with those constraints. And at times it can be interesting to figure out how to best um, tune an environment, if you will,
Alright.
and get it to where it's can be ideal as
Mhm,
it can possibly be
mhm,
within those given constraints. So that presents an interesting challenge,
mhm,
and you get that problem solving ability that comes out, and that's something that you develop as a student
mhm,
as you're trying to learn how to program or what network security looks like, whatever it may be as a student. As a student, there are a lot of problem solving elements, but that carries into your professional career as well. you just might use it a little bit differently. Those problem solving capabilities.
Yeah.
And as we know too with COVID,
Oh,
that's shaken up things as well. I mean,
right.
companies who weren't working remotely
Mhm.
at all ever had to get creative with working remotely. I was still with Penn State when COVID happened,
Mhm.
and we had never worked remotely in the department where I was at the time.
Mhm.
And they had to get creative with our work schedules and working from home at a hybrid scale and that sort of thing.
Right.
Um, there's also now we're seeing a shift in work style as well.
Mhm.
So as a student, you learn about like I remember that we learned a lot about ideal work environments, like with consideration to an office and
Mhm.
folks coming into the office. We didn't account for a pandemic
Mhm.
and this shift in office work to remote work or even a hybrid model. So that's been interesting to see as well what different organizations are doing, um, whether they were fully remote and going back to the office or staying fully remote. That's also been very interesting to see. And I certainly didn't expect something like that to happen as a student, just
Right.
the shift in working environments.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one thing that's very difficult to teach is how to become creative, or how to become an independent learner. But that's, I think, our ultimate goal when we're trying to teach our students. By the end of the process, by the time they graduate, we want them to be really creative. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be independent learners, because the learning continues, right, after graduation. Sorry to disappoint some of the students out there listening. It's never over, by the way. So,
Yes.
so as soon as you get your diploma, actually, there's much more to learn. And I think that's one of the things we try to teach our students. Learning has to continue on even after you're done with your degrees.
There's always something new to learn. And like I said, that's
Mhm.
one of the exciting parts about working in this field is there's always something new to learn or always someone new to learn from.
Mhm.
And that's a great way of meeting people or meeting different groups or getting involved with different groups is um,
Mhm.
just learning something new or
Mhm.
asking somebody more experienced for help in an area where they might be an expert.
Mhm.
But you're right. I mean, the learning doesn't stop once you receive your degree. And even if you were to go on and receive a master's degree or a PhD, the learning doesn't stop after you receive those degrees.
I
It
have
it's
I have all those degrees, and I have to learn every day.
yes. Yes. So you absolutely understand.
Oh yeah, 100%. I do have a question from the audience, and let's see. The question is, what do companies expect from recent graduates for an entry-level technical position?
That's a good question.
Mhm.
Because it really depends on the position. If it's more like programming focused, of course, they're going to want you to have some level of programming knowledge or interest. And in cases like that, with those more technical interviews, you might be responsible or on the hook for like a technical test as part of the interview process, like a programming challenge.
Mhm.
Um, with just the position that I started out with, so my first position was the desktop support slash cybersecurity position. The items that they wanted me to know going into that position, if I can remember correctly, they liked that I had some networking background, so they liked that that was part of my college experience.
Mhm.
Um, they liked that I had some experience working in Windows and Linux environments.
Mhm.
Um, they liked so during the actual interviews, they had some problem solving questions,
Mm,
just basic how, in this situation, how would you handle this problem? Those sort of things. So that those were things that would have come up during the interview. Things that so I've been part of a couple of different hiring committees.
mhm,
The qualities that I would want to see from an entry level technical person would be the technical experience, like depending on the role. Again, if it's programming focused, having this programming that programming background or some knowledge or interest in that. If it's networking, then some kind of network interest or background, or something in there that says that you're a problem solver. Um, the other quality that I like to see is that you're taking initiative in some way. So um, that you demonstrate in some way a willingness to learn and to grow. So
mhm,
if you go into an interview or you have it on your resume that you're learning a new skill, or you're taking up a certain technical project. Maybe you're trying to figure out a problem on your own and you're taking it upon yourself to learn that. Maybe you're studying for a certification. We love to see folks who are willing to learn and grow. That to me speaks volumes. In some cases, more than the actual hands on technical stuff,
right,
because if you have that initiative,
mhm,
y- anything can be taught
right,
at that uh, stage. I mean, so that to me sets candidates apart, is that willingness to learn and to grow,
mm,
and uh, they're hungry to come in and pursue the opportunity that's presented to them.
mhm.
So just off the top of my head, those are a few things that would come to mind for an entry level, the qualities that would stand out for entry level technical positions.
Yeah, I think you said it very well, and a lot of times the concerns our students have is that they're probably expected to know all these things, and they're expected to perform, like professionals from day one. That's not really the expectation.
Mhm.
It's more about, like what Victoria said earlier, whether you're willing to learn, whether you have a potential. I think that's what they're looking for, because
Yes.
they can provide all the training on the job pretty much.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I know it's my first job right out of college. And that's another thing. When you look at these job descriptions, if you're not pursuing, like if you don't meet 100% of the criteria that they're looking for, if it still sounds like a good job based on other qualities, I'd say go for it, because my first job out of college, the ideal candidate was somebody with at least 2 years of experience, which I didn't have. I was fresh out of college.
Mhm.
Um, but I went in and they saw that I had the initiative, and that was something that I spoke with my colleagues after I had started, and they said that that was a quality that really stood out to them. Was I showed the initiative to come in on day one and learn all that I needed to get the job done and do the job well. Did I know everything from day one that I was going to have to do? Absolutely not. And at times it can be a little bit scary when you come in, and or even during an interview, it could be scary
Mhm.
if you might not know something. But it's okay to even say that you don't know.
Mhm.
Um, but if you show that, I think that initiative, or showing initiative and willingness to learn and grow,
Mhm.
absolutely speaks volumes,
Mhm.
especially in this field.
Mhm. Very well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to discuss with you slightly more was your experience of this developing tutorials, and how beneficial that experience has been since you graduated. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that type of experience and how that's really helpful to what you're doing today.
Yes. So to give everyone a little bit of context,
Mhm.
part of our assignments as undergrads
Mhm.
was to, in some cases, it was to learn a new tool or to explain a concept. And the exercise or the assignment was done in the form of not just showing that you could do it, but actually doing the exercise and going back and creating a tutorial documentation.
Mhm.
And the idea was we could hand it to anybody and they could follow it. It was just like a guidebook. They could follow it and be able to execute the assignment perfectly. It's kind of it's easy to go in and to do an assignment, but to actually go back and explain and to teach, like to reteach how it's done, is another level of thinking. It creates another layer to the exercise, and it was beneficial to me. I learned more actually um,
Mhm.
when I completed assignments that way because it reinforced
Mhm.
what I was learning in class or as part of completing the assignment. So I've actually used that a lot with every role that I've had post graduation. So with that in mind, like with my first job, I right out of school, I
Mhm.
had created a training program for some of our colleagues um, to follow, and
Mhm.
it was just simple tutorial docs on certain roles and responsibilities that they had. It helped ensure consistency with our compliance efforts when I was in the position of more of a boots on the ground technical role, just making sure that everyone's efforts across the team were the same.
Mhm.
um, I've used the tutorial documentation in the structure of those labs to help onboard new employees,
Mhm.
develop processes to kind of streamline what we're doing,
Mhm.
just across all of the different roles that I've had
Mhm.
over the years. But it's been very beneficial, and it's honestly um, it's also created a great talking point during different interviews that I've had as well, because a lot of companies look for folks who can come in and
Mhm.
um, create consistencies
Mhm.
with their efforts.
Mhm.
So they see the benefit. Many companies see the benefit in these types of exercises within their organizations.
Mhm.
So having that experience as an undergrad has absolutely paid off within the industry.
Yeah. And one thing I would also like to add there is that you could use those documents as, I guess, some evidence that shows, what you're capable of doing. So it
Yes.
could be a resume builder, right? So let's
Yes.
say not just as a student, of course, yeah, you can show all those tutorials you make as students
Mhm.
to show the potential employers that you're really capable and you know what you're talking about. But even as a professional who's working in industry already, if you have so many of those, you could definitely use those as your way of making yourself more competitive,
Mhm.
right?
Yes. And even when it comes to making or providing recommendations to
Mhm.
clients, um, so when you create those like a lab or tutorial doc, um, the steps need to be simple. You can't rattle on for pages and pages about what you're doing. You need
Mhm.
to keep the reader or the participant or the colleague engaged, and so they follow everything perfectly, and the each task makes sense, if you will. When it comes to making recommendations for clients as an external assessor working in governance, risk, and compliance, when I go to speak with companies, um, having the tutorial doc mentality
Mhm.
and keeping the steps of action or a plan of action simple
Mhm.
also pays off in that way as well. So even if I'm not creating tutorial documentation for them, still keeping the mindset of simple steps makes it easier for them to follow through and see the value in it and see that it's really not that complicated when everything's boiled down. It's the steps are very, very simple to follow through, and they're more willing to take proactive measures to improve their cybersecurity posture.
Mhm. Yep, that's great. Yeah. So you're definitely using these things in practice, and you're really getting a lot out of these types of documentation, which is very good to know. And I can now tell my students, this works. I'm not
It
lying.
pays off.
Great, great. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about was the role of mentoring in your
Mhm.
career development. And I know over the several years you've been in industry, you've actually probably developed this network of people who are very supportive and also providing mentoring here and there. And I was just thinking that it would be interesting for you to talk about the role of mentoring in your career development.
Yes. So, of course, with different folks who I've worked with over the years, I've developed very positive relationships with them, and they've helped me with different tasks on the job and to think about where I want to go with my career. Um, I also like following a lot of experienced folks on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. InfoSec Twitter is a great space to be in. There's a wonderful community there.
Mhm,
Um, and I would say that when I've looked for folks to follow within LinkedIn, I've looked for people who work in the same industry as me, as well as the direction where I want to take my career. So
mhm,
I follow and am connected with a variety of different folks, and in doing that, I can gain so many different perspectives on the best career pathway for me, and
mhm,
to be open minded about new opportunities that might be out there. And just reading some of the insights from other folks has empowered me to take risks
mhm,
with my career, and they have paid off for me in the long run.
mhm,
And I'm really thankful that for all of the folks who have shared their stories, because it's been very encouraging to me.
mhm,
And the different network that I have, I've, like I mentioned, I've connected with a lot of folks, different colleagues who I've worked with, and other people in the industry. And I've received their support through phone and text conversations.
mhm,
They've helped me with mock interviews, and they've reviewed my resume as well.
mhm,
And just building those connections with those folks has given me the confidence to be successful in my career. And it's very encouraging to know that I have folks who have my back when I need help. And it goes both ways. They know that I have their back when they need me as well. So
mhm,
it's awesome to develop
mhm,
these positive relationships with other folks in the industry.
mhm. Yeah, definitely. And it's also, I think, community building, right? So you don't really have to know probably somebody in person.
Hmm.
Just like what you're doing, you're following people on social media, trying to
Yes,
provide your help, through the chats or emails. And these days, I think it's much, much easier to do because it could be just a Zoom call. It doesn't have to be an in-person meeting.
that's what's nice.
Yeah, and you should definitely take advantage of developing your own network of people who could be there when you're in need and who could provide you with some insightful tips and those types of things. So that's something I definitely recommend, and I know Victoria is on the same page there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let's see. So I mean, I'm having a lot of fun right now.
This
Wow.
is fun.
Uh-huh.
I'm enjoying it.
Okay. What type of organizations might you participate in? What role will that play in your future? So that was one of the questions I prepared. And this is in the context of, I mean, as we develop our career,
Mhm.
we also want to get involved in some of these organizations, professional organizations. So in that context, I think I'm posing that question. So for
Okay.
example, I belong to many professional organizations like, for example, like once again, acronym IEEE. Or I mean, if you are a researcher, that's one of the, or engineer in general,
Mhm.
IEEE is one of those organizations. We also have an organization for security, cybersecurity professionals. It's called, I think, ISC squared. That's another one. But I'm not gonna probably talk about it too much because Victoria is gonna talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, what's great about
Mhm,
cybersecurity, there's so many different focus groups within cyber,
mhm,
and especially for minorities, which is awesome. And with that, even allies can join as well. So
mhm,
they actually encourage that. Like, some that I can think of would be Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu,
mhm,
Blacks in Cybersecurity,
mhm,
Women in Tech Pittsburgh, ISC Squared, like you mentioned. Um, there's actually a new group I found last week, and it just got started. It's called the Cybersecurity Gatebreakers,
mhm,
and it's for new folks coming into cybersecurity as well as folks who are already in the industry, and they want to empower and encourage and motivate newcomers as they break into cybersecurity. So that's a new group that just came out, like I said, want to say like maybe a week or two ago. Um, some other groups that I'm personally involved with
mhm.
include PA Women Work. So Pennsylvania Women Work is open to men and women. There's a mentorship program called 3 Cups of Coffee that I'm involved with, and that's a virtual program. Um, there's also a mock interview program that we have. There are other different programs available as well, but I primarily am involved with the mock interview program and the mentorship program.
Mhm,
Um, there are other organizations out there. This one is specific to Pennsylvania folks or folks in Pennsylvania,
mhm,
but it's a really great program. We have some great folks in there. It's a great space to be in. I encourage you to find organizations similar to them that might be local to you. um, Compliance overflow is another one I'm involved with. That's another one that's fairly new, and it's compliance focused because there aren't really a lot of compliance focused groups right now, but this is another group of compliance professionals and aspiring compliance professionals. Um, I also mentioned earlier the cybersecurity gatebreakers group. I just signed up to see where they need help there as well. Um, I also would encourage folks, so there's something that um, I would say a lot of newcomers coming in think that all cybersecurity professionals eat, sleep, and breathe everything technology
mhm,
from the time the sun comes up till the time the sun comes down, and like I'm doing different cybersecurity projects every weekend, and I I just am constantly in technology and learning different things. Um, I would say that if tech is your hobby and you're genuinely interested, then absolutely, if that's your interest and hobby, great. I encourage you to continue to learn and um, to obtain new certs and that sort of thing. I would also encourage folks to pursue non-tech hobbies and groups if that's something that you might be interested in. So don't feel like you have to force yourself to like technology hobbies and different things. So like that way you can avoid potential burnout. You don't want to get burned out and become frustrated or discouraged or feel like you're constantly trying to keep up with things and you can't stay ahead. So I would encourage you for the for your mental health and your overall well-being to pursue other groups that might be out there, non-technical groups. So perhaps if you're interested in like a running club or a club at your gym, or Toastmasters, or like maybe a book
Oh,
club,
Toastmasters,
basketball. What
definitely,
was that?
definitely Toastmasters.
Oh yeah, you love Toastmasters. It is a good group. But though, and I'm sure you could speak to this as well. Those non-technical hobbies, not necessarily always being hands-on keyboard, um, they actually help you indirectly with your career. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
if with Toastmasters, for instance, you're developing those public speaking
Mhm.
abilities, you're practicing that, and you could use that in your career as you're giving presentations or teaching courses,
Okay.
or anything like that.
Mhm.
um, and like exercise might be good for your overall physical health.
Mhm.
Oftentimes with cybersecurity, you're sitting at a desk at a computer, so just
Mhm.
getting up and moving
Oh
just
yeah, yeah.
is just such a nice mood booster. So I would definitely say yes. The technical and the cybersecurity groups are great to be a part of,
Mhm.
and there is nothing wrong with
Mhm.
pursuing non-technical hobbies and
Mhm.
developing non-technical skills as well, because
Mhm.
they may benefit you in your career
Mhm.
indirectly.
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah, and I think it's important to be able to smell the roses, as they say, and yeah, because you cannot just be working all the time. And I think what happens at some point is that you're sitting there, but you're not really being productive. And in order for you to be able to use your time wisely, I think it's nice to have a hobby that really refreshes your mind.
Yes.
And that's what also keeps you going without really getting into these slumps or depressions and those
Hmm.
types of things. So in that
Hmm.
sense, I think it's important to do like some kind of a daily routine. You wake up, you do maybe a 2 mile run.
Yep.
You play the piano a little. I mean, I'm talking about
Hmm.
myself.
Yeah, yeah, but it's great. It's great
Yeah,
to do that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that way, you're always fresh and in
Hmm.
your mind, and you're always ready to tackle on another project and so on. So yeah, it's never
Yes.
a waste of time, I would think. Yeah.
No, and
Mhm.
I mean, having those other skills, it
Mhm.
just keeps you sharp.
Mhm.
And like if you're, like you talked about, a 2 mile run, perhaps,
Mhm.
if you're trying to get your time down, or maybe
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
uh running in the rain, or if you're trying to learn a new song as you're playing piano, like
Mhm.
those are small
Mhm.
goals.
Mhm.
And even if you're trying to break into the industry, or you're frustrated
Mhm.
with maybe where you're at in your career, like
Mhm.
having those non-technical hobbies are a great way to just continue continue to
Yeah.
allow you to be motivated and
Oh yeah.
have other things to look forward to, other hobbies and goals to pursue.
Yeah, and sometimes it's okay to just sit there and I don't know, just don't do anything. I mean, that's also okay. So,
Yeah,
don't feel so bad about you just, not being productive 100% all the time because I mean, as a
that's
human
true.
being, we need that kind of downtime too.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's essential.
Yeah, it is. Actually, one of the viewers just said, "Thank you for your encouragement to show initiative at the very beginning of our work journey, despite not having experience out there. Powerful advice, Victoria." So you're
Thank you,
getting some
Nancy.
positive reviews there. It's great. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, it's already 12:53, so our time's almost up. And I want to ask you this final question about your future plans. So, looking into the future,
Hmm.
any ideas of the best route for your career path in terms of, you know, academic, both academic or industry route? Because I think,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be always industry either, because you
Hmm.
could go back to school, you could
Yep.
maybe start teaching, who knows? So,
Hmm.
what do you have in mind?
It's hard to say exactly, because at the beginning of my career, I would have never ever thought that I would be working in GRC, but here I am doing compliance work, and I really really enjoy it. So like I said earlier, I could be doing something completely different 5 years from now. I have no idea. Some areas that I've considered pursuing include possibly shifting to the management side, pursuing a VCSO position, VCSO type work. Um, I do like working in external compliance. So right now, I really enjoy what I'm doing.
Mhm,
I love working with different companies, and each company presents its own challenges.
mhm,
Um, I would not put a master's program off of the table. I've considered that.
mhm,
Um, that's just a time thing at this point, but it's not off the table. So I've looked into different master's programs as well. So I mean,
mhm,
where I go from here, I'm not quite sure, but I'm very excited to be working in cybersecurity because of all of the opportunities that are out there. So I'm
mhm,
really excited to see where my career does go.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I'm looking forward to, you know, seeing you really thrive in all these things you're trying to do. And I guess talking about those acronyms earlier, you just mentioned VC, so that's like virtual chief, let's see, cyber security officer, right?
Yes.
VISO, chief
Yes.
information security officer, I
Yes.
guess.
And for those watching who might not be aware of what a VCSO is, so it's basically overseeing security efforts but it takes it more from a business perspective. And
Mhm,
what's the value of and what's the strength of the security program and through the lens of
mhm,
the business perspective. So
mhm,
taking a look more from that angle. So that seems interesting to me. So
mhm,
that's why I would consider that for the
mhm,
future.
mhm. Great. We have another audience question, which is
Awesome.
any advices to grow as a leader after starting your first corporate job?
That's a good question. I would say, and it's something that I did early in my career. You might be the newest person fresh out of college, but you can make a difference at your organization. So something I've said over the years to different colleagues and different folks who I've helped is you don't necessarily have to be the loudest person in the room to make the biggest impact. So,
Right.
with that said, you don't need to be the top guy
Mhm.
to make a difference or to be a
Oh,
leader in your organization. You don't need to be.
mhm.
If you could be, like I said, the newest person on the team and still demonstrate leadership,
Oh,
even if you're not in a leadership specific role,
oh, yeah, yeah.
like a manager or something. So, what I like to do with my first job, and what I've done with other roles
Mhm,
is I look for windows of opportunity where I can demonstrate my strengths. So
mhm,
I mentioned earlier that there was one program we needed to improve the training side of it, and we needed to improve our training program. And I saw that window of opportunity
mhm,
to make improvements
mhm,
to the program that we had at the time.
mhm,
And I took the initiative and ran with it. And if other folks wanted to build upon that particular program that was built, they could. But I just had my ideas and I wanted to pitch them as best as I could and to share my feedback and insight
mhm,
for how we could improve things. But I mean,
mhm,
if there are those windows of opportunity where you can show your strengths, maybe you're great with people
mhm,
and you make a difference with your users if you're working internally, or
mhm,
you make a difference with your clients if you're working from an external perspective, helping different companies. Um, I think it's great to come in with a positive attitude and to be proactive and just put your best foot forward. Um, and put in 100% from day one. Like, you don't need to be a leader to put in 100%, but if you make the effort and show the initiative,
mhm,
um, those are great seeds to plant
mhm,
if you want to grow and to become a leader.
mhm.
um,
Oh,
and I mean, I know new folks who are entry level, and it's something that I could have done better earlier in my career. There's
mm,
so many new folks who have
mm,
broken into cybersecurity with their first jobs,
mhm,
and they're mentoring as they're in their first positions, and they know that they don't have all of the years of experience. They're not in a leadership role, but they're doing the best that they can to help other folks out. So that's another way. If you can help folks out, any way that you can um, help others and to just put your best foot forward, just in everything that you do, it actually does speak volumes and it does pay off.
Mhm. Yeah, that is very true, and I really agree with your point on, anybody can become a leader in what they're doing, and
Hmm.
you become a leader of yourself every day. Like you wake up, right? And you do that, like we said, 2-mile run, although you
Yes.
you you want to be lazy. And
You
yeah,
yes.
when you work on your project, I mean, you put everything you have into whatever you're submitting. I mean, that's how you become
Mhm.
a leader. It's nothing, about telling other people what to do. It's more
No.
about you doing your best in whatever you're doing. You know? Yeah.
And you do it when nobody's watching too.
Mhm.
Even when nobody's watching,
Mhm.
if you're running and
Mhm.
it's you're doing your 2-mile run, you're not in a race. It's not for a medal. It's not for a prize. You're doing it because you're trying to improve yourself.
Mhm.
So I mean, even showing those leadership
Mhm.
capabilities or those qualities, it's important to do that even when nobody's watching.
And then there are also like other opportunities even outside your organization to learn more about how to become a more effective leader and so on. Like
Mhm,
example, the Toastmasters Club we just talked about. Toastmasters International is this organization that helps you also develop not just public speaking skills, but also your leadership skills because
mhm,
you get to do all these different kinds of roles and learn from doing those roles. So there are other learning opportunities, plenty of learning opportunities
mhm.
out there if you have the initiatives to become a better leader. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. But wow, our time's up.
That went by very quickly.
And yeah, that's been an hour. Wow, I can't.
Yeah,
Last time just went by, but
it
thanks
did.
again, Victoria. And I'm sure there will be a request in the future to invite you over again. So
I would love that.
we'll probably have to do part two here.
That I would be fine with that. That would be great.
Yeah, and I want to thank our audience actually for asking those very insightful questions and being here with us today. And we'll be back soon with our second episode of Where Are the Graduates? Bye.
See ya.
Uh-huh.